All right, strap in, everyone, because today we are diving deep into Generation Zero. And let me tell you, things are about to get real interesting. We've got a mountain of intel here. News articles, game descriptions, even some pretty cryptic in-game dialogue. And it's all pointing toward a massive showdown, one that's brewing in this alternate 1980s Sweden.
You know what's really interesting about Generation Zero? It just drops you right into the action. Imagine this, okay? You're in the Swedish countryside, some good old 80s music is playing, and bam! Hostile machines have taken over. It's like a mashup of sci-fi thriller meets 80s coming-of-age story, but with the danger dial cranked way up.
And it's not like this is some brand new game either. Generation Zero has been out for a while, 5 years actually, so there's definitely already a rich world out there and a ton of lore to dive into. But what is everyone buzzing is this Showdown update, which is looking like it could be the culmination of everything. So for those of us who haven't had the chance to play yet, what exactly is Generation Zero all about?
Well, at its heart, Generation Zero is all about survival. But, and this is key, it's not your typical run-and-gun type of game. You're dropped into this hostile, open-world setting. And your success. It really hinges on your strategy, your resourcefulness, and understanding exactly what you're up against.
Speaking of what you're up against,
Yeah.
there's this one line of dialogue from the game that really stuck with me. It says, "You kill me, I return stronger." That sounds pretty ominous, don't you think? It's almost like these machines are actually learning and evolving every time you encounter them.
That's a great observation, actually. And it really gets to the heart of what makes Generation Zero so compelling. You see, it's not just about staying alive. It's about uncovering a mystery. Why are these machines here? What's their purpose? And can they be stopped?
Okay, so we've got these hostile machines to deal with, this super mysterious storyline, and a whole lot of survival to contend with. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the Showdown update, let's break down the basics. You mentioned this open world, so just how big are we talking?
Oh, think of it like this. Sprawling Swedish landscapes, but rendered in amazing detail. And that's all thanks to the Apex engine. You've got dynamic weather, day and night cycles, and this incredibly realistic sound design. It truly immerses you in the world. But, and this is important, it's not just about the visuals. This world, it's dangerous.
So you're saying I can't just go in guns blazing and expect to come out on top?
Definitely not. Brute force is only going to get you so far in Generation Zero. You've got to learn the environment, scavenge for resources, and you've got to constantly adapt your tactics based on whatever threats you encounter.
Which leads us to the threats. Our sources have mentioned a whole bunch of different robotic enemies. What kind of mechanical monsters are we dealing with here?
Okay, picture this. You're sneaking through a dense forest, tension is high, then suddenly you hear this metallic whirring sound. You slowly peek around a tree, and there it is, a harvester. It's this massive machine built to gather resources. But here's the thing, it's rarely ever alone. Often it's escorted by these smaller, more agile machines that are just ready to pounce at a moment's notice.
So even going out to scavenge for supplies can become a strategic operation. This isn't exactly a walk in the park, huh?
Not even close. Each machine type,
Yeah.
it poses its own unique challenge. You've got some that are small and agile, like the Tick. It can actually self-destruct and take you out with it if you're not careful. And then you've got Seekers. They look harmless, but they're actually scouts that'll call in reinforcements if they spot you. So stealth becomes absolutely crucial.
Knowing your enemy seems super important.
Yeah.
But what happens when things escalate? I mean, there has to be something bigger out there, something that'll really make you think twice before engaging.
Oh, there's definitely something bigger. You've got runners that'll attack you in packs, hunters who are silent but deadly, and then, well, there's the tank.
The tank. I saw that mentioned in one of the game descriptions. That sounds terrifying.
Oh, it is. The tank is heavily armored, it fires rockets, and it can basically level entire buildings. Taking one down requires serious planning and coordination and a whole lot of courage.
All right, I'm officially intimidated. But what about teaming up? Can you face these metal menaces with friends? Or are you on your own for this?
You're not alone. Generation Zero actually offers seamless co-op for up to 4 players. Imagine coordinating your attacks with your friends, reviving downed teammates, and sharing those sweet victory spoils. It adds a whole new dimension to the gameplay.
Teamwork definitely makes those fights a little less scary, I bet. But I'm really curious about this Showdown update. It's being called the final chapter. But what does that actually mean for the game?
So the developers have been pretty upfront about this one, their team. They're moving on to some other projects. But the Generation Zero community spaces, they're gonna stay active. You'll still be able to play multiplayer. And there's even a chance they might revisit the Generation Zero world sometime in the future. But for now, Showdown, it's the grand finale.
Grand finale, huh? So does that mean this Showdown update is packed with new content, like new missions, or even a new area to explore?
You betcha. The developers have actually confirmed that there's a whole new area that's going to be central to the Showdown update. They're keeping the specifics kind of hush-hush for now, though. But it's not going to be as big as the previous one, the Himshell Mountain region expansion. From what we've heard, though, it's going to deliver a really tight narrative experience that ties everything together.
Ooh, a new area with some juicy story reveals. Sounds intriguing. But what about those of us who haven't been glued to every update and every little bit of lore? Will we be completely lost?
That's a good question. So there's this really cool element in the game, Russian nesting dolls. They're scattered all over the world, and each one holds a piece of lore, and the developers have been really pushing players to find them and to pay attention to the stories they tell. They've even hinted that those details will be really important for understanding the events of Showdown.
Okay, so a scavenger hunt for lore inside the game. That's a pretty clever way to do it. It makes me wonder, are those nesting dolls just a fun little side thing? Or are they hinting at something more, like something deeper, maybe connected to the machines?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? These developers, they're masters at weaving in these little hints and clues all over the world and in the lore. I think these nesting dolls could be a key to unlocking the big picture.
All right, so Final the Nesting Dolls is going on my to-do list. But let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about the actual gameplay changes coming in Showdown. Any hints about new features or mechanics?
Here's where things get really exciting. For both veterans and newbies, the developers, they've been listening to the community, and they're bringing a lot of that feedback into this update. For example, they're introducing 3 brand new experimental weapons.
Experimental weapons. What makes those different from the regular ones?
Think of them as like souped-up versions of existing weapons. But with unique modifications, they're designed to add a whole new level of strategy to combat, especially when you're going up against those tougher machines.
So a little something to even the odds. I like that. But what about character progression? Any changes to the skill system?
Oh yeah, this is a big one. They're actually uncapping the skill points.
Whoa, really?
Yep. That means you'll finally be able to unlock all the skill upgrades and fully max out your character. It's like they're giving players all the tools they need to become the ultimate machine-fighting badasses.
Talk about character empowerment. But let's address something that's super important here. For anyone thinking about jumping into Generation Zero for the first time, accessibility. Will you need to own all the previous DLC or expansions to play Showdown?
Great question. And the answer is no. The devs have made it clear that you only need the base game to experience all the Showdown content. Of course, the Alpine Unrest and FNIX Rising expansions, they'll add a bit more context to the story, but they're not essential for understanding the main narrative.
Okay, so that's awesome. It means everyone can jump in and be part of this grand finale, no matter how much they've played before. And speaking of jumping in, this is a huge update, right? New content, a new area, the final chapter of the story. This thing's got to cost a pretty penny, yeah.
Nope. Get this. Showdown is going to be totally free for anyone who owns Generation Zero. It's the devs' way of saying thank you to the community for all the support over the years.
Wow, a free, massive update that wraps up the story and adds tons of new stuff. That's really generous. But it makes me wonder, if this is the final update, what happens to Generation Zero after Showdown? Do the servers shut down? Will we still be able to play?
So, as we said before, the development team is moving on. But the game isn't going anywhere. Multiplayer will still be available because it uses peer-to-peer hosting, so you can still team up with your buddies and explore the world. And the community spaces, those will stay active too, so you'll still have a place to hang out with other survivors, share strategies, and discuss all that lore.
That's reassuring. Sounds like even though the devs are moving on, Generation Zero is going to live on through its community.
Huh.
But I got to ask, with all this talk about it being the final chapter and the devs moving on, is there any hope for a sequel?
Well, the devs haven't totally ruled out a return to the Generation Zero world. Maybe a sequel, maybe a spin-off, who knows? Right now, their focus is on Showdown and giving the current story a satisfying conclusion. But they've definitely left the door open for the future.
So there's still a little glimmer of hope for those of us who are hoping to see more of this world and all its mysteries. But for now, let's focus on what we know is coming. Showdown. It's wrapping up the story, giving us answers to some big questions. And maybe, just maybe, It'll reveal the truth behind those creepy machines.
And let's not forget the human element here. We've talked about the machines and survival and this epic showdown, but what about the people at the heart of it all? The game is called Generation Zero, after all. So who are these zeros? Are they the players?
That's a question that's been bouncing around the Generation Zero community for years. What's your take on that?
Well, there's no definitive answer in the game itself, but the most popular theory is that Generation Zero refers to the generation that came of age in the 80s. You know, the generation that now has to face this machine apocalypse head on. It's like the game is saying, this is your world now. This is your fight.
So it's about more than just surviving. It's about taking back what was lost.
Exactly. It adds a whole other level of depth to the experience. You're not just fighting to stay alive. You're fighting for the future of an entire generation, for the chance to rebuild. And that idea really connects with a lot of players, especially those who grew up during that era.
It's a really powerful concept.
But
With the devs hinting at this deeper mystery behind the invasion. What if Generation Zero refers to something else entirely? What if it's not about us, the humans? What if it's about the machines? Maybe they're the zeros, a brand new form of intelligence emerging into the world.
now that's a fascinating way to look at it. It really challenges the whole human-centered view, doesn't it? And it makes you think about the machines in a whole new way. Are they just mindless robots? Or is there something more going on? Do they have their own motives, their own goals? And if they are Generation Zero, what does that mean for humanity?
It's like they're saying, hey, what if this was us? What if we went too far?
It really makes you think.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what's really cool? Even with all this heavy stuff, the setting, that alternate 1980s Sweden, it kind of adds another layer to everything.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the 80s were a time of huge technological leaps, right?
Yeah.
But also this underlying anxiety about what the future held. It's like the game is tapping right into that fear.
Yeah.
And showing us what happens if it all goes wrong.
Yeah. It's a world where technology, instead of helping us, it turns against us. And it makes you wonder, what if things had played out differently? What if our obsession with tech led us down a similar path? It's a scary thought, but one that's worth thinking about, even if it's just in a video game.
Like a warning sign, telling us to be careful and think things through. But let's get back to the game itself for a sec. We've talked about the story, the machines, and all these big philosophical questions. But what about actually playing Generation Zero? What makes it different from all the other open-world survival games out there?
Well, for me, it's the mix of strategic combat, exploration, and that constant sense of mystery. The combat isn't just about shooting everything that moves, it's about planning your attacks, using the world around you, and finding the weaknesses of each machine.
So it's not just about having a big gun, it's about knowing how to use it.
Exactly. And the exploration is awesome, too. This world is huge and beautiful, and there's always something new to find, whether it's a new location, some much-needed resources, or even clues to piece together the story.
Like solving a giant puzzle.
Pretty much.
What about the co-op? You mentioned teaming up with friends. Does that change things much?
Oh, yeah. Co-op in Generation Zero is all about working together. You and your buddies can coordinate attacks, cover each other, and come up with plans to tackle tough challenges. It makes the game a lot more fun.
More brains to take on the robots.
Exactly.
The elephant in the room.
The big metal elephant, actually. The Showdown update. Is this really the end for Generation Zero?
Well, like we've talked about, the dev team is moving on to new things.
Yeah.
But the game will still be around, multiplayer will still be up and running, and the community is not going anywhere.
That's good to hear. So even though the story's ending, there's still plenty to do in Generation Zero.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And you never know. Maybe this isn't goodbye forever. The devs haven't ruled out coming back to this world someday. Maybe a sequel. Maybe something totally different.
Fingers crossed. But for now, we've got Showdown to look forward to.
And it's going to be epic.
It sounds like Showdown brings everything together.
Yeah. The combat, the mystery, the world, and of course, those robots.
But then don't forget the feels. Oh, right. We talked about survival and all that. But there's also this real sense of camaraderie, especially when you're playing with friends. That bond you form when you're fighting for your lives, it's what sets Generation Zero apart from other games.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, folks, there you have it. The world of Generation Zero. From its killer combat and those crazy machines to the mystery of Showdown. It's a game that makes you think, makes you adapt, and throws you headfirst into the unknown.
And as we go into this final chapter, there's still one question hanging in the air. What's the real story behind these machines? What's going to happen in Showdown?
I guess we'll find out soon enough. Until then, keep exploring, keep those questions coming, and keep diving deep.